Team Dyess. My name is Master Sergeant Morera. I'm with the 436 Training Squadron, and I'm here on behalf of the top 3 to present the Promotion and Leadership class. So today, a few subjects that we're going to be talking about: testing, grade roles and responsibilities, performance levels, knowing your audience, feedback, awards, requirements examples. We're going to be going over some of those. Talk about the requirements for EPRs, bullet construction, awards exercises, and then I'm going to talk to you about the resources that I used to put together this slideshow. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is studying and testing. So first thing we talk about here is read it all, don't highlight right away, be selective. You see everything that's on that slide deck. The big thing is, did you grow up with a computer and a mouse? Did you grow up reading on a tablet? Most likely the answer to that is no. You grew up with textbooks and writing everything down as kinesthetic learners. So if that was the case and you've got a big test coming up, you might want to consider printing out those materials, highlighting them, and doing the things that are listed here for round 1, round 2, 3, and 4. And of course, for number 5, creating some tests. Now, another thing that you might want to consider is doing some test anxiety exercises. Now, there's a link there on that slide. You could visit that link, take you to a mastering test taking PDF. Now, on that PDF, there's a couple of things that might help you to get over some test anxiety, but also some examples to consider how to answer or to find the right answer that's in a test. There's also something called the 25% rule that exists in the Air Force. This is actually something that's been proven to me, and I've talked with many UTMs about. There are 25% of A, B, C, and D answers that you're going to find in WAPS and CDC testing. So when you go to test for that next promotion rank to staff sergeant or to technical sergeant, you actually want to make sure that you have an A, B, C, and D, 25% relatively equal answers of A, B, C, and D. Now also, when you're answering those questions, make sure that you stick with your first answer. Usually that's your gut answer. That's something that you recall. And if you decide to change that answer, you have to make sure that you can disprove that answer, that the new answer that you're selecting cancels out that last answer. If you can't cancel it out, if you can't disprove it, you should probably stick with that first answer. And also, one last tip from your NCOA graduates or ALS graduates, many of us have learned that you have to read the whole answer, I mean, the whole question, right? And then select the best answer. Sometimes it's good to read those answers first to see what would fit best into that question, though. Now, another thing that we didn't get to talk about that you may not have seen is using candy during test taking, but also using that during your study time. When you're studying, using a hard candy, something like cinnamon, and then going into that test and using that same candy, cinnamon, you have a better recall. Now, on from test taking into grade roles and responsibilities. These are not limitations, and in no means, but this is your expectation of where you should fall within your lane and which lane you want to be in. If you're an airman, your job is to be a proficient worker. That's what you're working on. You're impacting your unit. Now, that doesn't mean that that's your limitation. If your desire is to move up from this area into the NCO area, what does an NCO do? This is something that you should understand, rather, to help you to move into those areas, to capture these things on your EPR. An NCO is an entry-level leader. Is your EPR as an E4 reflecting that you're doing something that's entry-level leader? If so, you're setting yourself up for that next step. And likewise for our NCOs, E5 through E6, entry-level leader. But an E7 leads a flight. So with an E7 leading a flight, can you do that as an E6? If you are you fulfilling the role of an E7? These grade roles and responsibilities help you to show where you should be going. Of course, what would you say that you do here? let's get into that. So this is what you should be doing at your current level and what you should be doing to get to your next level. And what is that next level for you? Now, you're not just preparing as an E4 just to become a staff sergeant. I'm sure you have some sort of dream that you'd maybe like to move up to become a senior NCO, or you hope to be a chief someday, or is it a desire to commission? Now, with any of these, you should have a plan and you should be setting yourself up now. How can you set yourself up? Well, that's easy. Right now, most of our airmen are at this average tactical level. Now, with tactical level, your job performance is going to consist of helped, supported, participated, assisted, performed, maintained, processed, worked. This is your average airman, and it's okay to be in this realm. Your recognition will include squadron level coins, squadron level quarterly awards, and letters of appreciation. Your self-improvement milestones should include completing your CDCs, your OJT, upgrade training completion, CLEP Dante's classes, and maybe even a couple of classes after that, but working toward your CCAF. That's a good way to move toward it. But also some certifications. Learning about those certifications may just be the first step. You don't exactly have to chase after them just now, but it's a good idea to consider, and it's something that you should get educated on to know what your choices are going to be later on when you become an NCO. Some base and community involvement, volunteering, but most of these things can be at the squadron level. They don't have to be in such big terms, such as being a leader of a volunteer event. Just volunteering is simply good enough at this level. But should you choose to go up to the next level, well, that's going to be our next performance level, supervisory level. Now, we'll work backwards on this one with the base community involvement. This is where you should be leading, and your self-improvement milestones are going to be a little bit bigger too. For self-improvement, we're looking at SEJ PME. Of course, every time we throw out an acronym, we should probably define it, right? Senior Enlisted Joint PME, which can be found on the Joint Knowledge Online website, JKO. SEJ PME is open to staff sergeants, so it's a great idea at E5 to start considering what you want to accomplish next. Now, self-improvement doesn't just stop there. We also want to make sure that you are working toward that CCAF, and this is, if you are preparing to become a master sergeant or a senior NCO at some point, this is the level to start setting yourself up. This is the level that you want to make sure your CCAF is accomplished. Recognition will include squadron annual awards and group quarterly awards for most average NCOs at this level. They'll also receive some group and wing level coins and some high visibility LOAs. Now, their job performance will consist of supervised, led, operated, directed, implemented, and mentored. The next level. Now, I talked about led in that last one, right? Supervisors, they're going to lead. In this aspect, if you've noticed, management level has something new to offer, and that's leadership effect. I was told by several of my supervisors before I became a master sergeant that this was a game changer. This was a little bit different. You had to step up and you had to become a leader. And sure enough, in my first EPR, there was a lot that talked about leadership, and I had to speak to those levels. So are you going to be able to do that same thing when you get to this level? Or have you been preparing for it as an E6? Take a look at the 911 for a master sergeant before you consider even sewing on that stripe and knowing what you're going to have to do to get to that level. For your management level job performance, you're going to have organized, directed, planned, supervised, and teamed. Recognition includes group annual awards, wing quarterlies, and annuals, wing and higher headquarters coins, and then you're going to move into something new, something different, leadership effect. This is how you supervise or lead those large teams, manage larger programs. Your self-improvement, your CCAF should already be complete at those levels, at the management level. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be your CCAF. It could be an associate's degree. That's per your new Air Force Handbook 362618. Now, at the E7 level, though, SEJ PME Part 2 comes out. With Part 2, this comes another opportunity for you to seek some professional growth and understand the joint environment a little bit better. Now, another thing that opens up is going to be senior NCO leadership course or seminars, and getting a part of those. One of the biggest things that you want to do here is exactly what I'm trying to do right now, is the mentorship part of it and leading your airmen. That was one of the biggest game changers that I learned about as a senior NCO, and it's one of the best parts of being a senior NCO in today's Air Force, is being able to mentor y'all. Base community involvement for a management level should be actively involved in clubs like AFSA, the top 3, and support various clubs around the base, such as the 5-6 clubs or the Airmen's clubs, the UACs. And of course, off base as well. There are veterans clubs that gladly would take a senior NCO to come over and work with them and just to be a part of their organizations. Now we move on to our leadership level. Now, this more than anything is to let you know what you should be doing to get to this level. It's not so much what they're doing at this level, but what we should aspire to do to get to a level of leadership. And that's headquarters level senior master sergeants and chiefs. Because for your average personnel, which we listed in those last 3 performance levels, these folks are nothing like average. They stand out a little bit more. Leadership, they lead on a broad scope, provide guidance to unit personnel, and affect the overall war effort. Their recognition, command level awards, higher headquarters and headquarters Air Force level awards. Self-improvement, by now they've most likely accomplished most of these self-improvement milestones that most of us are trying to pursue. They may have bachelor's degrees or even higher, working toward higher education. Their base and community involvement, at this point, most of them are more advisors toward programs such as the top 3. There are also chiefs group that they may be a part of. Now, as we transition out of performance levels, we have to know, now we're going to be writing to these things. Most of the time you're going to write about your career, and you're going to have to speak to what you are doing, and you're going to speak to those levels. Now when you do write, what you're going to need to know is, do not assume that your audience knows your job. Every time that you write a quarterly awards package or an EPR, you may be writing that to somebody who is not in your career field. And if that's going to be the case, don't assume that they know your job. You'll also use that key duties, the tasks and responsibilities, that top section of the EPR that talks about what you do. I hope that it's not the same every year. Even at the airman level, especially at the airman level, you should be progressing and making some changes to that every year, updating it and showing, because that's your opportunity to reflect. This is how you grew from one year to the next. Now, you also want to demonstrate mastery, just excellence in all we do. That's an expectation in your EPR. By saying that you got a 4.0 GPA, well, that's good, but what did you do with that education? That's one of the bigger parts of self-improvement that we hope to see, is what you're doing with it. Is it changing how you lead? Is it changing something in your organization? We expect greatness. And at the first time that I heard that from a chief, I thought, wow, I thought my 4.0 was good enough. I guess not. It's a little bit more than that. We want to know what you're doing with that education. Are you passing it along? Are you mentoring? Some things to consider there. Now also, always check your acronyms and abbreviations. I mentioned SEJ PME earlier, and I didn't follow it up with, if I hadn't followed it up with actually explaining what it was, some people may not know what I was talking about. You're going to have some people sitting with deer in the headlights when they see some of these terms. So speak in those layman's terms, because many of these things, what an operations airman, for instance, know what the security forces airman was talking about. What is a BA-22? What is TMDE versus PMEL? What does BDOC stand for? What is an IDMT? Some people will catch these. Some people have been exposed to these over time. Some don't. If you're curious, I would pause the video and look at the bottom, and underneath this slide at the bottom, you're going to see everything upside down. That'll help you to understand those terms. Do not make the EPR more complicated than it already is. proofread, double check, spell check, space check, get help from peers before you send out an important email. It is really important to make sure that you don't send the wrong message. Now, getting an education is huge to this part. Command level chief once was giving a briefing to us, and he had mentioned that when he selects somebody for his staff, that he would like somebody who's had some education, maybe a bachelor's degree, because their administrative skills are going to be better. When somebody on that level sends out an email and it wasn't proofread, it wasn't double checked, there's spelling errors, there's grammatical errors, that reflects poorly upon the organization, and it reflects poorly upon the individual. So make sure you're doing these things. Don't write like you think. Definitely don't write like you text. Now, the ACA, you have got to give people feedback. I'm not just talking about the initial, the midterm, or during that EPR. It should be a continuous process. You should always be pulling people aside and giving them good feedback. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to give your supervisor a little bit of a hint that maybe you need some of that feedback, that you don't know where you stand. It's okay to ask for that kind of help. And if your supervisor's not stepping up, find another mentor in your organization that's going to give you feedback and let you know where you stand and what you're doing. But supervisors, don't leave them guessing. Don't leave them assuming where they are. They might think that they're doing awesome, and you might think otherwise. Now, some expectations in providing that feedback, though. Don't be vague. Do some volunteers. Thank you. How many volunteers? What level? What do you expect of me? Do you want me to lead? Do you want me to just volunteer? Be specific on how you want them to volunteer. Now, some timelines for the midterm ACAs. So to accomplish your Airman Comprehensive Feedback, senior airmen, they're generally due in September. Staff sergeants in July, tech sergeants in May, master sergeants in March. Supervisors, good idea to document that, put that down somewhere, maybe make a calendar reminder. And just a tip, don't just make that calendar reminder for one day. What if that one day that you set 4 months in advance, you become busy on? You know what a good idea might be? All 5 days of that week that you planned on giving that feedback, make a calendar reminder for all 5 of those days. And if you just so happen to skip it on Monday, it's going to pop back up on Tuesday. It'll give you an opportunity that week, and it'll remind you constantly that you need to accomplish those feedbacks. Now, that's for supervisors, but what about for the raidee? It's a good idea during that period to remind yourself that you need one. And it may not be the first thing on your mind, but this is where your EPR begins. Now, be honest about those ACAs and those EPR supervisors. You do want to mark where your airmen are, especially during the feedback. It's a huge deal during that feedback to let them know where they stand, because they don't want it to be a surprise during the EPR. Now, my last commander, he took a look at all of the tech sergeant EPRs that were coming back across the board, and every one of them was to the right. And this particular commander said, I know that not everybody is to the right. Not everybody deserves a promote now. So what are you telling me? And he urged the senior NCO Corps, go back and consider whether or not you're marking these people appropriately. And we did. We made some changes. And sure enough, the people who deserved a promote now or a must promote, they were highlighted because their supervisors truly did believe that they were among the best. Okay. Now, why give an ACA for the initial? That's to set the expectations for the year. These are your expectations. This is what you would like to get done during that year, not for 6 months, but for the whole year. The midterm is how they are stepping up to those expectations. And of course, the EPR is the results and whether or not they accomplished everything that you set for them. Now, that's also the setup for next year. It could be, in a way, your initial. We did great this year. Hopefully we don't have an initial to accomplish. But what happens if we didn't do the greatest, or we didn't do as great as we hoped we had? What should we be planning to do to make next year better? Now, that's also going to be something we talk about in part 2, and that's overcoming a bad EPR. Another thing that we can consider is a PLDP, a Personal Leadership Development Plan. It's not an ACA. It's nothing that you really have to hold somebody to, but it is a plan, maybe a contract that you and your airmen set up. And it should go, maybe it could go along with that ACA. Maybe you could save it in a similar folder on your desktop, and you can set those goals for not just the short term, not just for the year, but for a longer period of time, and find out what this airman might want to do in the future, and of course hold them to that. Ask them, hey, are you doing these things for the long term? Are you preparing for those things? Check off those milestones and make sure that you hold them accountable for their goals to push them to be the best that they can be. Now, I came from the 912th Air Refueling Squadron at March Air Reserve Base about a year ago. And when I was there, I can tell you that most of those things up there, Mission Support Professional Award, it's a quarterly award. The Airman NCO and Senior NCO, that's a quarterly award that just about every organization has. Do your airmen actually know how many bullets they need? Do you know how many bullets you need to put on one of those packages? How about for a monthly program, such as the Top 3 Shining Star, which we had at 912th? We have something similar here too. Do you know how many bullets it takes, or when those bullets are accepted, and who to send them to? These are some things that supervisors need to consider, because this is some of the stuff in your EPRs that set you apart from others. This is that must promote now, and even stratification level difference between who's going to get those promotion statements and who's not. Now I've got a question for the 436th. It's not popping up. There we go. For our airmen, our senior NCOs, all right, and our NCOs, for a quarterly award, how many bullets are required? How about for traditional or positional annual awards? This is something that every organization, you should be asking your airmen so that they know what the expectation is and what they should be doing. There's your answer. Now on to that next slide. Does this look like your EPR? You know what? As an airman, I can tell you that happened to me often. I didn't know what to put down. It's not so much that I didn't do anything. It's just I didn't know how to document that stuff. Get with your supervisors and start learning those things. There are usually silver bullets writing seminars or some sort of writing seminar that you can take even as an airman, and you can learn how to start writing those bullets. Now, one great example, though, would be a 1206 that maybe your supervisor put together for you. Get a look at those bullets. Start trying to formulate them. This isn't a bullet writing class. We will get into bullets later on, but this is something very important that you'll need to understand. Now, the number of bullets in an award package, that's one thing. And it's also great to accomplish so many award packages because you develop so many of those bullets, you can easily fill an EPR. How many bullets did I say were on the quarterly awards for the 436th? Was that 4? I believe so. Well, if I did 4 bullets and there are 4 quarters, that gives me 12 bullets. How many do I need for an EPR? Wow. It's amazing how that works, right? So, fill one out every quarter, regardless of whether or not, I'm not going to win, or maybe I don't have a chance. Don't worry about that. Just fill one out so that you have the ammo needed so that when it's EPR time, you're ready to go. Now, EPRs, 11 duty-related bullets, and 2 whole airman concept. That's what you need for your EPR, for Airman Basic through Tech Sergeant. But for a Master Sergeant, it changes a little bit. We need 12 duty-related, and by duty-related, much of that should include your leadership effect, and 2 whole airman concept. Now, we can mix and match just a little bit with the whole airman concept, but most of those bullets should be duty-related. Now, when we move into actually building those bullets, bullet construction, what is a bullet? There's a 3-part fractured sentence. Yeah, so many little parts to it that need so much work. But let's get the basic idea here. ARI or AIR. Now, you've got action, result, impact, or you can mix that around a little bit. Now, sometimes those terms are confusing to people, and so you have to be able to break it down to them in a different way. What about what, how impact? Action, results, impact, and award. How, why, result, impact. There are different ways to form a bullet, and these are some of those ways. Your action element is typically going to start off with a good, strong verb. Your friend Ed, he's always getting picked first in gym class. Yeah, Ed goes first every time. All right. Think of that when you're thinking of this EPR. Now, also notice that this bracket this bracket of words that's in this screen: networked, collaborated, partnered, teamed. Many of these are actually synonyms that I put together so that when you can't use one, like lead, you can't have lead all the way down that EPR. What are some other options that you can use for lead? But supervised, mentored, evaluated, there are some good options here. The result element. How was that work done? This is what you were doing. How did you get it done? And what effect was there? What were the results of those actions? Then you get into the impact element of it. How work and results impact the mission. And we're going to get into the mission later on. Some guidelines for writing an EPR: choosing your verbs and where to put them. You typically don't want to have a verb that's the same: lead, 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 lead. You also don't want them to be in that same bullet statement: lead, lead. Right? So we're going to choose to change them up a little bit. One practice that a lot of senior NCOs have here is they open up a thesaurus and they keep it open, and you just check, maybe mix and match some of those words up a little bit to get a good variety and to get a good description. When you're filling out the header of an EPR, you want to get that guidance and make sure that everything is correct the first time. Some of that guidance comes straight out of an EPR, out of an AFI. Now, a new description of key duties every year. We talked about this earlier. This is important to show growth. How are you developing from that performance level of that airman to NCO? Bullet space. Some people prefer almost no space at all, but a good rule in developing your bullets, especially as a young airman or a young NCO, don't leave enough space at the end to fit a lowercase w. There's also a half spacing trick that you might want to ask some of your senior NCOs about, and squeeze those words together to try to get as much as you can out of that bullet. Now, that leads into our last line here. Find a mentor and reach out to other bases if you need to. Find somebody who is great at writing or who has a good idea of what to put into that bullet. Now, in this section here, we're going to talk a little bit about how bullets are scored. So we put together a bullet, but what are we looking for in that bullet? Sometimes a bullet is scored with 2 points at most, and some organizations do things a little differently. Maybe they break it up to 6 points per bullet, and that'll lead to some crazy points on the package. But overall, all of those packages should be the same, and they should read the same so that we understand where these people fall when that score falls and we decide who gets that award. Some factors that we're going to consider when scoring, though. Was there any fluff? Is there a member working above their performance level? What's the overall impact? Is it squadron level? Is it unit level? Or is it that wing level that you're going up to? Are they displaying any kind of leadership? Did the member take on some initiative? And of course, something that is not always a huge part of it, but it can be a part of it, is just simply how the bullet was constructed. And supervisors, that's our job. That's really the one thing that we have to do, is construct that bullet. Now, I talked to you about the resources, and you'll have the resources at the end of this, but Brown Bag Lessons, The Magic of Bullet Writing. If you just simply type in brownbaglessons.com, you'll be taken to a website where you can get some of these documents, and this is a page straight out of that book. It's how we should score our bullets. It's a great example, and it gives you an idea not only of how those bullets are scored, but what you should include to get the best score for your bullet. Here's our scenario. We'll let you read. You'll see at the bottom, that's the bullet that we came up with. Now, in many instances, that bullet's going to go through a NCO or maybe even a senior NCO after that. And even after that senior NCO who has all of the knowledge in the Air Force, it's going to get changed yet again. Even as senior NCOs, we're still learning how to improve those bullets and get the most out of them. And sometimes we'll do that by a collaboration. Sometimes we call them writing clinics, and some people have known them as murder boards. If you look at the red down at the bottom, maybe you'll understand why we call them murder boards. Man, we turn those things red, and we mark all over them. Notice the red here. Hard worker. We consider that to be fluff. We're not going to include that. Let's get straight to the point. Start off with Ed. Performed back shop duties. Okay, well, that gets to the action, but that's not a very specific action. The inaccurate result, repaired over 100 tires? Well, it doesn't look like he repaired over 100 tires. Let's be specific in our numbers. Be honest. It was 88 tires. Now, last, saved over 170K, bolstered mission success. What mission? Can we speak more to the mission? That's something that we'll cover in part 2. So there's our overall breakdown for about what the point value might be between each of the scoring members. Here is our revised bullet. Now, senior NCOs, let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay? I understand this is probably not where you would have taken it, but this is simply just an improvement. This could have been by that NCO reaching out to another NCO and saying, hey, how could I write this better? Somebody who has a little experience in bullet writing. We've improved it a little bit. We got straight to the point. Our action, it's an action. A result, it's a decent result. And our impact, not bad. We're off to a much better start in improving this bullet. So this is our breakdown for how many points they would have received. Now, I say 1.5 to 2 because is every senior NCO or every voting member going to give the same marks? No, that's definitely not a thing. Everybody is going to judge them a little bit differently according to their background, what they think. Hopefully not what they think of the person, though. That's something that you don't want to include on a board like this. It's often a good practice to remove names from 1206s so that you don't have a bias. Now, something that you may have some bias toward is a particular skill or bullet and a particular performance level or grade. For instance, who should get credit for this bullet? Who's going to get credit? It's going to be the staffs and techs. Why not the master sergeant? Curious. Oh, we talked about this earlier. Should a master sergeant have their CCAF or associate's degree at this point? I would think so. So to see somebody at that level working toward an associate degree, they would likely not get any credit. Maybe a little bit. Who should get credit for this one? That's flight training plan. So flight level, let's see, flight level was a master sergeant. So let's see what we got here. A master sergeant would get credit. Now, while a master sergeant and a tech sergeant would get some credit, would a senior airman and a staff sergeant get more credit? So if we're thinking about 2 points, master sergeant, probably about a point here. But as a senior airman or a staff sergeant doing something at a flight level, I'd probably give 2 full points. This would be great at that level. And for a tech sergeant, 1.25, 1.5, easily. Now, who should get credit for this one, though? Well, everybody. Hey! Now, there's going to be a little bit of a difference here with a senior master sergeant. That last part, the impact, even the master sergeants and the tech sergeants, I don't know that that last part is going to fly for those levels. We should be explaining, especially around those levels, maybe even at tech sergeant, what did we do with those classes? What did we do with that excellence that we put forth? Was there something that we changed in our organization? Now this says a BA in history. So with a BA in history, there's probably some analytical skills that they could be using, or maybe there's the squadron's historian program, or the history museum on base. Could there be something that they could be putting together with those folks and making some improvements around the base? And this slide, it speaks exactly to that. It also speaks to maybe a staff sergeant who completed their degree in IT and was selected to lead a wing level server exchange, allowed no downtime during that upgrade because they picked something new up from those classes. Now this is one of the last orders of business. We get into the bullet writing exercise. I would ask that if you're watching this, you pause this video and you take a look at this point right here and you form a bullet out of it. Now, I wouldn't do this alone because who's going to look at it? Is a senior NCO going to maybe look at this, or a peer? This is what you can consider out of making something from this bullet right here. Show your NCOs or senior NCOs this particular page right here and have them look at it and make a bullet out of it. Now, once you're done with that bullet, go over with them. What would you do differently? What would you highlight? What would you change about this? That's what a bullet does. It goes through a transformation from several different levels, and this is one great way to practice it. Taking a full action all the way through and writing a bullet out of it, and then having somebody take a look at that bullet. What can you do to improve it? Many senior NCOs do this. We will exchange our APRs amongst each other as we are the ones who are typically writing them so that we can learn a little bit more. So we've got through all of part one today. We covered testing, grade roles and responsibilities. We got into performance levels, knowing your audience. We talked a lot about feedback and about those awards requirements. Big thing about those awards, making sure that you accomplish them every quarter, regardless of how you were doing. Put one together. Why? What did the requirements of the EPR say? 11? 14? How many bullets do you need for this next EPR? We got into bullet construction, and we talked about air or airy and the different versions that you can use to accomplish that. We talked about those, we got into awards exercises. Normally I would take a break at this point and I would go into part two, but part two is going to be set for a later date, July 10th. So come back at that point and we'll talk a little bit more. But last but not least, I promised to share some resources. I've got two for you. The first resource is from Eric Jaron. Eric Jaron is actually a retired Chief Master Sergeant. He retired as a command chief from Edwards Air Force Base. Eric actually trained up Master Sergeant Schottmer on not this particular PowerPoint, but a different one. It's something that I took and I made part of my own. That's also something that I took from Chief Wilson, and I took the principles that Chief Jaron put together, and that's what I use to put together this particular show for you. So why do I have credits here? One of the biggest reasons, I actually give this out to just about any high-speed NCO or senior NCO that wants to take it and take it to their organizations or take it to their own individual wings and teach on it. But the one thing that I always ask them to do is to leave those credits here. Now, as I'm at the bottom there, I hope that you'd add your name to it as that next NCO or senior NCO that learns from this, takes it, brings it back to their organization, and improves your airmen. Now, that was just one of the sources. The other source is Mastering Skills and Test Taking Packet. There's an actual PDF that you can use, and we discussed that earlier. And if you go back and you see that link, put it in. But of course, you could simply just Google that line, and it will take you to Mayland University, a PDF. Open it. It could help you improve that test score, and it doesn't just have to be for an Air Force test. Could be for college. Now, at this time, we'd like to turn over the chat to questions. If you've got anything for me, I'd be happy to answer it.
We have one question.
All right.
So, if you are working at the membership level, should you be focusing on completing tasks for your EPRs or packages that are at the membership level, or should you be focusing on trying to go up to the next level?
Now, let's say that you're an airman, AMN or A1C. You're new to the organization. Just focus on accomplishing those tasks and becoming more proficient. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to start swaying into the next lane. You don't want to be completely into that next lane just yet, because if you do, well, you may be missing out on some of the things that are important. Proficiency, knowing your job well, because what are you going to do as an NCO? You're going to lead. When you lead, you have to show that you know what you're doing. The only way that we're going to know how what we were doing, myself, an aircrew flight equipment specialist, if I didn't know how to pack the parachute, how could I train my airmen? Or how could I tell them whether or not they were doing something right or wrong? We have to focus on our proficiency to start. And as we become more proficient, we start to lean more toward that supervisory level. As an A1C, we could begin training people. And so that's something that you want to do. And what is a trainer, in essence? Is that an entry-level leader? That is something that you want to consider, and it's a good question. Where are you? What are you doing? You're in your lane. Are you starting to sway out of your lane into that next lane? That's what you should be doing. Try to move over a little bit, but don't go completely into that next lane until you are ready to do so. Promotion, or you've been placed into that position. Because there may be somebody that's already over there, and it's their job to do those things.
Second and last question.
Okay.
What should a follower ask from their supervisor during their ACA?
You know, there's actually a question that revolves around that towards the bottom of the ACA, right? And with that question, I mean, it could be a loaded question, but is it the only question that you have for your supervisor? Man, I hope not. I hope that you ask a lot more of your supervisor. One big thing that, I would ask my supervisor is, what can I do to earn some awards and secure a promotion? Well, that's actually answered in the entire feedback if you do it right. So maybe not so much just ending there, but continuously talking to your supervisor about what you can do to improve, or what areas that maybe you need some work in. And not always asking for a paper copy feedback. Maybe just saying, I don't want a new ACA, but I'd like to sit down and talk with you according to my last one, and say, we've answered this question, but what's next? What should I do next? Now, at some point, you'll feel comfortable in what you're doing, usually around that NCO level, and you start to move up towards between supervisory, and you're swaying into that lane of management level. We start to become more confident in knowing, I know what I need to do next. But definitely at that tactical level, at that membership level, we're just now learning about all of the different things that we need to be doing. And trust me, I know that it's a lot. Sometimes it's overwhelming even at this level, because there are many different things that a senior NCO still has to do and still has to learn. Don't think that you're alone in this. We're still learning too. But if you take that time to ask lots of questions, and remember that the only stupid question is the one unasked. Unless you start talking about why is the sky blue, and then I'm going to tell you, go get an education. If that's it, I guess we can close up for today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for watching. This production was brought to you by the Dyess Top 3 organization, which broadcast every Thursday and Friday at 1500. We'll be continuing with this topic next on the 10th at 1500. Have a great day.